Hey, it's Lawrence, and welcome back to another episode of High Intensity Business, your one stop shop for growing your hit business and fueling your passion for high intensity training. This episode is a little bit different today. I was actually featured on the Discover Strength podcast to interview the CEO and founder of Discover Strength, Luke Carlson. And this is because it was Discover Strength's 18th year anniversary. And it was a great opportunity for myself to interview Luke about, what Luke does at this time of year, what the Discover Strength origin story was like, and also just talk about their strategy and really give you, the hit business owner or business owner, leader or manager, some real value in terms of how does a really, really effective owner and operator like Luke, what do they do in these situations, and what can you learn about their origin story and about their strategy to help you in your business? So some of the things that we cover that I think you will really love are firstly just the nostalgia of learning about, the origin story, like what did Discover Strength look like in the beginning? What did the studio look like? What were the questions that Luke was trying to answer, and how did he figure out that it was the right thing for him to do to start a business because he was going to do something else, but you have to listen to the podcast to learn what that is. We also spend a lot of time just talking about strategy. I think this is a really important topic because quite often both of us see business owners who are very scattered and have created a lot of complexity in their business and feel confused and overwhelmed and are struggling. And you can tell that some of the time this causes a business owner entrepreneur to just throw the towel in and give up. But by having a strategy, which means having core values that you don't get away from, having core focus, having a strategic niche, what is your focus in your business? What do you do? Having a target market, like this is the person that we serve and who we design a business around, by making those decisions up front and spending time on that, not rushing it. And then always going back to that when you're looking at a new opportunity. So you can clearly say yes and no to the right things. And you should probably be saying no to most things. Will really help you stay focused and simplify your business and make it a lot easier to actually grow your business. So again, we talk about books like Traction from Gino Wickman, which create a really lovely framework for this, which is based on EOS, and other books as well. And it's just a really informative discussion about these things that are really just fundamental to all business. Doesn't mean that you have to implement the whole of Traction or EOS in your business, but the principles are timeless and will really help you. And we get into why on this podcast. And then lastly, again, I mentioned it, but we really talk about, I guess, Luke's top business book recommendations for starting and growing your business as well. I think you're really going to enjoy this. I'm looking forward to the feedback. Before we dive into today's episode, please grab your free PDF playbook, referral machine, 4-step referral blueprint for high intensity training businesses. You can download that now over at highintensitybusiness.com/ref. That's short for referrals, just REF. You'll also get a full-length video training with Luke on the best proven practices for getting referrals in your business. That's mostly free tactics for just generating more customers for your high intensity training business, which I know most of you would love to do. So please go to highintensitybusiness.com/ref. Now, without any further ado, let's start this fantastic episode with the one and only Luke Carlson.
I'm Luke Carlson. I'm the CEO of Discover Strength, and I'm an exercise physiologist. In this episode, we have Lawrence Neal, the host of High Intensity Business, the High Intensity Business podcast, and the founder of High Intensity Business, joining us. Lawrence has been podcasting for over 10 years. His podcast, High Intensity Business, has over 460 episodes. I look at Lawrence as a wonderful friend and colleague in our industry. He's been largely credited with popularizing evidence-based resistance training over the last 10 years. His podcast is a treasure trove of information on really two big topics. One, high-intensity resistance training. He's had every academic, every researcher, every strength training practitioner as a guest over the years. Over the last few years, he's turned the direction of the podcast more and more toward, well, how do you launch and run a successful business around all things evidence-based resistance training? Lawrence, welcome. Thank you for joining us this episode. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor. That was a great introduction. Thank you.
And the reason we're having Lawrence this episode is when this episode drops, this will mark Discover Strength's 18-year anniversary. We opened up May 22nd of 2006. And so Lawrence and I had chatted about it, and we thought we'd do an episode talking about kind of the origin story, how Discover Strength was launched. So Lawrence, thank you so much for joining.
You're very welcome. I'm excited to get into it. How does it feel was my initial question. How does it feel to have your, 18th year anniversary?
18 years, every anniversary, and anyone that's ever operated a business, owned a business, I think has a period of, for me, it's a period of reflection and a period of gratitude. So when I say reflection, I think, all right, let's slow down and talk about how do you feel about the direction of the business? How do you feel about where you are headed? You're reflecting on milestones, accomplishments, but the word gratitude is always so closely connected with all of that. And when I say gratitude, one of the sources of gratitude is, hey, that you're still operating, right? I mean, I remember my 1 year anniversary, and we used to always do a big party each year. We had live music, and we had all of our clients together outside of our original location. And I had so much gratitude that we were open. It felt like it took forever just to get the business open. And so to be open for 1 year, I was like, this is incredible. And now to be at 18 years is like I said, a time for me to reflect and a time to just connect with all of the reasons that I have gratitude around.
Isn't that the funny thing, right? Because isn't there a statistic for it's quite unlikely for businesses to be open this long? I mean, you would know that data better than I, right? So that's where that gratitude comes from, that humbleness. Well, we're still operating. Obviously, you're way more successful than that. But do you have any,
Yeah,
insight on that?
when you said that, Lawrence, I was thinking the same thing. I don't know what the statistics are. I know, they're not good. How many businesses make it to 3 years or 5 years, and I have gratitude around that. But let's be clear, that was never the goal. The goal was never, hey, can we just stay open? The goal was to build something special and build something enduring. So as much as I say I have gratitude that we're still open, it's clearly that was never the objective. The goal was to create something with distinctive impact. Now I still have tremendous gratitude and humility that I still get to do. I mean, really, the gratitude and the humility is around, I can't believe that I get to do this every day. And I think the biggest source of gratitude is that very few people can say that they're just as excited about coming to work, 18 years into it as they were the day they started. And when I think about the business, I always think about those two parts. There's the technical work that we do, which is strength training. It's evidence-based resistance training. And the second part is leading and managing and the business side of the business. Well, I'm equally as excited about both of those two focuses today as I was 18 years ago. I'm excited about reading a scientific journal article and talking about muscle fibers and motor units and sets and reps. And I'm just as excited about growing and learning about all things business and management and leadership.
What are some of the exercises or an exercise you may do at this time of year, when you're celebrating the anniversary to reflect? I mean, you talked about reflecting on, still operating, still being open, being grateful, reflecting on milestones, goals achieved, etc. Do you go through, I know obviously you go through various different exercises and habits to reflect, but is there anything specifically you do around this time as like an annual reflection?
Yeah. Thank you for asking. So I'll do, every week, you're familiar with the practice of a clarity break. And the discipline of a clarity break is once a week, you get away from the work and you sit down with a notebook and you do your best thinking on the business. And you can do a clarity break around any conceivable topic. It's the blank notebook, you're doing your best thinking. And this is where your ideating comes from. This is where innovation comes from. This is where reflection comes from. But it requires slowing down and getting away from technology. And I think It's a practice that was popularized by an author named Gino Wickman. And he said he has to get into a coffee shop to do it. And, sometimes I'll do it on an airplane. Sometimes I'll do it in a coffee shop. But this week, the week of the anniversary, I'll always get my notebook and sit down and talk about or write about, think about what are the last 18 years, the last period of years meant to me? Do I have confidence in the direction that we're heading? What have been the highlights of the journey? So I'll do a thorough clarity break around the previous 18 years. That's the first thing I'll do. And then each week I do a weekly meeting with my leadership team, my direct reports, and I'll kick off that leadership team meeting. Well, we always kick the leadership team meeting off with a transition to the meeting, and we talk about, what are our personal highlights of the week, our personal successes, just share one of them. And then what's our one big professional win of the week? And we share those. So this week, we'll just make that a little bit different. I'll have everyone reflect on kind of their journey at Discover Strength and what they have gratitude around and where they see us heading in the next year.
A few follow-ups on that. So obviously, some listeners will be familiar with Clarity Break, which, like you say, is popularized by Gino Wickman in Traction, the book Traction. And one struggle I have with it, actually, which I'm wondering is shared, is the idea that you, like you say, you go away to do a clarity break in a different location, get away from the work, have a blank notepad, don't have technology. If I'm doing a clarity break to solve a problem, I need technology. I feel like I need technology to assist me in that process. Is that okay? Is that not ideal? How do you reconcile that?
Yeah, today when I do a clarity break, I always know what the clarity break topic is going to be going into it. And if it's a clarity break where I need some technology to be able to, I maybe need to look something up. I need to look at a reference of some kind. I will have a laptop with or phone with. So let's say I'm doing a clarity break on pricing in different markets. Okay, I can't just sit down with my notebook and do a clarity break on pricing in different markets. I maybe have 6 articles that I've kind of saved that I know I want to read through those articles, and so they'll be on my laptop. Or maybe I have a few videos that I want to watch, something I've seen on YouTube that I want to connect with or listen to a podcast. And then as I'm listening, then I'll write down all my best thoughts. Or frankly, I need to, have a spreadsheet in front of me. So depending on the topic of the clarity break, I'll have more than just a notebook. I would say, maybe 25% of the time, there's a little bit of technology involved. It just depends what kind of problem I'm solving and what I'm thinking through. The key to not having technology is if an email pops in, I'm not responding to the email, right?
Yeah.
My Slack, I'm trying to stay focused on the particular topic.
Yeah, and that's interesting you mentioned doing it on a plane because you can, these days you have Wi-Fi on planes. Some planes still don't. I'm sure the planes you fly on, Luke, probably do. So that's one way of, I guess, getting away from it. But you're right, it's the distraction, isn't it, which is the problem. No, that's really helpful. Thank you. So I want to go on to, actually, before I go on to this, I'd love to just hear briefly, how do you celebrate this, right? Do you have a company celebration? Like, what do you do there?
Yeah, for the first many years, we always did an anniversary party on the day of, the day that we opened. And so we would have food and drink. And Lawrence, you may know that I'm a fan of carrot cake. So we'd have carrot cake and we would have live music and give away prizes. And it was, we would do it literally right out in front of our original studio. And then when that studio moved across the parking lot, we would do it there. And we did that for years and years and years. Eventually, as we moved to more and more locations, we stopped doing that. And I think one of the reasons we stopped doing it is, well, one, we had multiple locations. And two, I always felt a little bit uncomfortable. I know we made it through 10 years of doing this, and we actually even changed the location of the party, where we'd rent out space and do it. At the end of the day, it felt a little bit selfish in that, everything we do in the business is supposed to be, let's put the customer at the center of the business. And the question we always ask, and so many businesses ask, is what's in it for me. That's what the customer, that's what our client has to think. And so if we're hosting a party around Discover Strength's anniversary, that just felt so selfish. And so we stopped doing the party after 10 years, but I still have my own tradition. My own tradition is the day that Discover Strength opened, that night, Monday, May 22nd, I went to a very mediocre Mexican restaurant, and our original location was Plymouth, Minnesota. This mediocre Mexican restaurant was Plymouth, Minnesota, and I had a mediocre Mexican dinner. And so every year I go back to that same restaurant and have a dinner. And sometimes I go with friends, sometimes I, go with colleagues or coworkers. In many years, I really like to go alone and bring a book and read a book that I find, inspirational, and just kind of soak in the gratitude. Well, that Mexican restaurant closed. So it closed 4 years ago now, 3 years ago.
It's anticlimactic.
Yeah, yeah. During the pandemic, we even picked up Mexican food from that restaurant, and we distanced, and a number of my leadership team and Heather, our chief of staff, we all got together, and I have the photos of us inside of our Chanhassen location, spread out and eating Mexican food before Memorial Weekend. That restaurant closed shortly after that, and so now we go to a pretty decent Mexican restaurant each year. So as we record this, we're Tuesday now, and our anniversary will be Wednesday. So my leadership team and Heather, who's our longtime chief of staff, will go out and go to a Mexican restaurant, and we'll go at like 4:30. It'll be early, and we'll just talk and have a little bit of food and reflect. And my team spoils me, and they try to give me some type of gift each year. And I said, Heather, absolutely no gift this year. You've done just an amazing job of this over the years. Let's just be together. So that'll be our tradition.
Is that like when they broke into your condo and decorated it with Christmas decorations?
Yeah. That was a Christmas gift. They spoiled me. We record this. You and I can see each other. I'm drinking out of a Discover Strength.
Oh wow! I need all this merch, by the way. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's a Roman numeral on this side.
Oh wow!
Numeral 16. So this was the gift I got for our 16-year anniversary.
Oh wow! Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah. See, I'm giving the listeners a bit of behind the scenes on Luke Carlson here. So let's discuss more about the Discover Strength origin story, strategy, and some of the specific tactics in the beginning, which I think would be valuable to some of those listening who are in positions, management, leadership, and business. Why did you start Discover Strength?
Well, I knew in 2003, 2004 that I wanted to start a business, Lawrence. So I was on a path toward completing a PhD in exercise science, and was really excited about either becoming a tenure track professor. I would have loved that life, or I was not going to complete the PhD, and I was going to become a strength coach in the NFL. And at that time, I was a lowly assistant strength and conditioning coach for the Minnesota Vikings. I had a wonderful mentor, our head strength coach. His name was Steve Wetzel. And I was going to be a NFL strength and conditioning coach, or a Division I college football strength and conditioning coach. And either one of those lives sounded wonderful to me. That was the path that I was on. And I had a wonderful mentor that pulled me aside and said, hey, you could do either one of those, but I think you have a skill set that would allow you to operate a business. And I thought, wow, I've never thought about that. I never thought about, operating a business, entrepreneurship. I didn't know a single entrepreneur. I didn't know anybody that, operated a business. And there was one person I had met. So there was one person I knew that was an entrepreneur, and his name was Joe Cirilli. And Joe Cirilli is the founder of the Gainesville Health and Fitness Center. Today, they've rebranded it Gainesville Health and Fitness. It is the most profitable health club in the world in Gainesville, Florida. It is one single health club. They opened 40 years ago. I had visited the club in 2002 and tried out some of their equipment that we were going to buy for the Vikings facility. And so I thought, wow, Joe's an entrepreneur. I could go talk to Joe. So I called Joe Cirilli. And since then, Joe Cirilli has been on the cover of Inc. magazine. He's been featured in Forbes. They were listed as the top 25 small businesses in the U.S. I mean, that is an extraordinary accomplishment.
Wow.
There's a lot of small businesses in the US, and this is one single health club. Now, not only is the wonderful health club, I think it might be one of the best customer service companies in the world in any industry. And so I am 24 years old at the time, and I scraped together the money to fly down and visit Joe. And Joe takes me to lunch. I get to his health club, I go inside, and we walk to his car. He has a Lexus LS. And I'm thinking, this must be like the richest guy on earth. I'd never been within 10 feet of a Lexus. And we went to lunch. We're driving to lunch, and I'm thinking, Lawrence, where is he going to take me to lunch? This guy is so incredibly wealthy. We went to Panera Bread, and it was lovely. And for 3 hours, he told me his rags to riches story. And we're having this conversation about how he launches the business. And as the story wraps up and our time together wraps up, he says, Luke, you need to learn something about business. You know about exercise, but there's this issue in entrepreneurship that an entrepreneur starts a business around something they have technical skill in, and they end up failing because they don't learn anything about how to run the business. So he said, you got to learn about how to run the business, read a business book. And Joe was very much shaped by the books that he had read. Joe's, I think, the smartest individual, one of the smartest individuals I've ever met. No formal education, did not go to college or university, but he has been educated by the books that he's selected to read over time. And so he said, you should read, it was either Built to Last or Good to Great by Jim Collins. Now, at the time, Good to Great was very popular. Built to Last was the first book of those two. And so I fly home, I buy Good to Great and Built to Last. I go to Starbucks, I start reading these books, and these books became the foundation of how I would think about business and how I would start Discover Strength. And let me tell you, there was no audiobooks at that time, clearly no podcasts. So I bought the physical copies and read them. And I also bought the CDs, and I would go on a run and listen to the CD on my no skip, no bounce, whatever it was, Sony Discman. And I could listen to the CDs and go on a run. I would pop the CD in as I was going to bed and just kind of listen to it every night before I went to bed. And those shaped my early thoughts about leadership and management and business. And I reflected on all of Jim Collins's teaching as I would sit in the Starbucks and kind of plan what Discover Strength would look like. So that's kind of the origin story. And I owe so much to Joe Cirilli, because Joe Cirilli was the guy that really got me started. And I would call him and visit him, and he'll tell you this. I visited him 4 times before Discover Strength opened. We opened in 2006. This was 2004 when I first visited. And I think on my 4th visit, he said, hey, you got to just open the business now. Like, stop visiting. You've
Stop procrastinating.
Exactly. You're procrastinating. You've learned enough. Just start the business.
That's such a good lesson right there. Joe Cirilli, wonderful man. And he was on the High Intensity Business podcast. So if anyone's interested in listening to that, just search Joe Cirilli, Ciruulli on highintensitybusiness.com to learn about that. Those 2 books, Built to Last, Good to Great, are they still for you? Obviously they're very popular business books. Are they still for you kind of timeless foundational books? Do you reflect on those books and think, actually, I don't agree with X, Y, and Z, and there's other books? I'm going to ask you about books anyway. So I'm wondering if they are still in your top 5, or, and I guess the second part to this question is, what are your 3 to 5 sort of highest recommended business books for those in business or wanting to start a business?
Those books have nostalgia for me because they really laid the foundation. They're the roots of everything that's Discover Strength. Today, I wouldn't recommend those books as the very first books somebody should read, or the most influential books for how to guide thinking about your business, either strategically or tactically. But for me, they're still incredibly important because those books stress what Collins calls the core ideology. And since the books have come out, now before Collins comes out with Built to Last, so both those books were studies. Built to Last was a study of, well, how come some companies are successful for 100 years? And other companies in the same industry, the same time period, facing the same external challenges, how come some businesses are great for 25 years, they fade away? So he does a massive research project on that and then writes the book, Built to Last. What makes a Built to Last company? And then Good to Great was also a research question, and that was, how come some companies are mediocre or they're good for a period of time? And then something happens and they make a leap to becoming great, and they sustain that greatness. And these books really introduce Collins' concept of core ideology. Today in 2024, everyone has a variation of this core ideology, but it's really three things. It's the core values. So the answer to the question, what do you believe? And then these beliefs have to guide behaviors, decisions, and actions. So I can remember reading Collins, hey, you got to figure out the core values. And what he said was the core values that you select, they don't have to be more virtuous. There's no empirical research that says if you pick more virtuous values, your organization is going to be more successful. You don't even have to pick the right values. What you need is you need to have a team of people that believe in a similar set of core values. They have to be shared values across the organization. And when you select these values, you're going to select your people. You're actually going to attract your team around these values. People who believe what you believe are going to join you. And I thought, well, I have to do this right. And so I sat down, I can tell you the Starbucks in Eden Prairie for listeners that are in Minnesota. I sat in that Starbucks and figured out what our core values were going to be. This is 2 years before the business ever opened, and our core values are consistent today. And those core values are learning, which just means we forever want to show up as a student. Servant leadership, which means we exist to help somebody else be successful. We want our life to be defined by our contribution, pouring into other people. So servant leadership is the second core value. The third core value is what we call creating our own future. Creating our own future just means we have agency. We get to choose our response to what happens to us in life. And I think Viktor Frankl probably writes the most eloquently about this, where he says the last human freedom is that we get to choose our response to what happens to us. So that's the third core value, creating your own future. And the last core value is what we call science-based. And it just means, well, let's defer to the scientific evidence to guide our decision-making. It also means let's make sure we understand that we are not preachers or prosecutors or politicians. We're supposed to think like a scientist, which means we have to have the humility of a scientist. Our idea that we're so convicted about, well, it's just a hypothesis. Right? If there's new information that says we can move in a different direction, then we should abandon that idea and we should move in a different direction. So those core values were established in 2004. They've stayed consistent over the last, 20 years, 18 years of operation. And when we hire somebody at Discover Strength, the first thing we ask in the very first interview is, hey, do you believe in these 4 things? If you believe in these 4 things, you should come work with us. And if you don't, you should just be honest with yourself. You're probably not going to be a good fit here if you don't believe in those things. So Collins writes about values. He also writes about core purpose, the fundamental reason for being for an organization. Beyond the technical work that you do, beyond making money, why does the company exist? And he talks about this core purpose. If there was no money to be made, would it still matter to you? That was an important litmus test. And does the core purpose, or is the core purpose also the purpose, the cause, the passion for the next employee that you're going to hire? It can't be about a founder. It can't be about, a leadership team and a leadership team only. And so our core purpose, I think done right, our core purpose it's like this unavoidable purpose. And for me, it's being 20 years old and being in undergraduate class at the University of Minnesota and studying motor units and muscle fibers and exercise science, biomechanics, loving all of it, Lawrence. But in that moment, realizing, hey, we're not studying all of this in a vacuum. If all of this scientific discovery, if this doesn't trickle down and actually impact how people work out, all of this is for naught. And I knew at that time in the year 2000, there was a lot of people exercising. We just weren't exercising in a way that was reflective of all of this scientific discovery. So I said, I want to spend the rest of my professional life bridging the gap between all of this scientific research and then how people actually work out. And so today, that's our core purpose. We call it leading the movement in evidence-based exercise. Evidence-based exercise means let's connect the scientific research to how people actually work out. And leading a movement means, well, let's lead a movement around this, which means we have to lead, of course, our staff and our clients and our colleagues and the academic exercise science world and the for-profit health club, fitness club world. It means we probably have to grow to a certain size. We have to show up with an integrity where someone wants to be a part of this movement. So lead the movement in evidence-based exercise continues to be that core purpose. So that's the second part of this core ideology. It's values, it's purpose. And the last part was, well, what's your culture all about? And over the years, I've come to realize that culture is just institutionalizing the core values, right? Not bureaucratizing the core values. It's institutionalizing them. So the core values are not just something that you say you believe in, but they're interwoven into every aspect of the business. They're woven into the process. You've actually operationalized the core value, how you hire people, how you reward and recognize, how you actually make business decisions. The core values they have a seat at the table at every meeting that you're actually in. So that's the culture.
Which, by the way, is a great way for listeners to unearth their own core values, right? Because it's a really, really hard exercise. I think it's one of the hardest parts of implementing traction or EOS, which for those listening, if you want a framework that collects all of these ideas together and puts in a nice framework, a nice operating system for your business, that's probably the place to start. Obviously, read Built to Last and Good to Great as well. They just develop your understanding of these concepts more. But yeah, so with core values, it's one of those where you taught me this, Luke, where you're not trying to create them out of nothing. You're trying to unearth them from what you currently believe. And one way of doing that is looking at what you're already doing in your business, what comes natural, and using that to guide you. What are you already interwoven that's really important to you, that's working well? And obviously another way is look at those you really admire on your staff and what are the characteristics, what are the values that they have. And that's another way, obviously, to brainstorm and try and narrow down the core values for your organization.
Yeah, 100%, Lawrence. You nailed that. And if you're listening to this podcast and you're like a founder of a company, I think one of the litmus tests is if you were to exit the company and start another company, those core values have to come with you, right? Like I can't work. I can't, be involved in a business. I can't do life without the core value of learning, right? It is a part of my DNA. I'm always going to bring that value with me. And the same is true of servant leadership, and the same is true of creating our own future. And so the values are less about the technical work that you're doing. Of course, even the core purpose is less about the technical work. But the key, one of the key qualities or characteristics of the core values is you would take them with you if you moved on to something else.
Yeah. I want to spend the last few minutes here just talking about, I guess, being a bit nostalgic, since it's, relevant to the theme of today, which is to talk about your first facility. Tell us all about it. Tell us, where it's located, what it looked like in terms of equipment. If it's the one I'm thinking of, it was extraordinarily successful as well. So perhaps you can comment on that too.
So our original location was Plymouth, Minnesota. And for anyone that's listening that's been to our Plymouth location, it was across the parking lot from our current Plymouth location. So Lawrence, I think you've been to our Plymouth location. So we were just located across that parking lot. We literally moved the equipment. We opened 2006. We operated in 2006 in that location. And then there was this island building built, 2 years after we opened. And it had some good co-tenants at the time. And I kind of begged our landlord that, hey, we should really be the end cap space. And they said no for like a year straight. And finally they said yes. And so we were the first tenant in that space. We built it out exactly how we wanted it. But our first location was an unattractive strip mall. And, I drove by it. This shows how long we've operated or how old I am. I was like going to a Blockbuster Video or a video rental space in the strip mall, renting a DVD. And I thought, well, that space right there is probably ugly enough where we could afford it. And so the first location was not attractive. We painted. When I launched Discover Strength, I had a business partner. I bought him out a number of years ago, but he was instrumental to us starting. He didn't really work in the business, but instrumental to us starting. And we literally painted the space ourselves, put the carpet in, and so not an attractive space, 1,600 square feet. But what we did have is unbelievable equipment. So we bought brand new Medics equipment and brand new hammer strength equipment and brand new Nautilus equipment. I just sat down. I had been a strength and conditioning coach for a number of years. I had used every conceivable type of exercise equipment. I was an equipment snob. And I said, I'm going to buy the best piece of equipment for every muscle group. It didn't matter what the brand was. We didn't go with one package of one manufacturer. We just selected, exercise by exercise. What was the best exercise for this muscle group? And so we had absolutely unbelievable brand new equipment, May 22nd, 2006, when that location opened. So not an attractive space, but wonderful equipment. And the other thing we did at the time was we made this commitment, and this was influenced by Joe Cirilli at Gainesville Health and Fitness, that we were going to dress professionally. So like my first day of work, I wore a shirt and tie. I can tell you the white dress shirt that I wore and the tie that I wore. And, we've dressed professionally ever since. And part of that was my influence from Joe. And part of it was this facility is not attractive. I'm going to try to have a little bit of a polished appearance myself. And that's definitely stuck over 18 years. But
Was it also back then, were you also thinking about premium positioning, as we talked about before? Was that come into your mind then? Because I don't know how much of that has been, you've developed a better understanding more recently or since.
100%. We wanted a premium position and we wanted differentiation. I just wanted to walk in the facility and say, oh, hold on, wait, this feels very different than other facilities that I've been in. And that differentiation has evolved over the years because what the marketplace has done has evolved, right? In 2006, the biggest, sell that I had to make was, this is not a membership. You're not here. And this is not a 24-hour key card access facility, because Anytime Fitness and Snap Fitness, both founded in Minnesota, like our neighbors, they were just gaining traction at the time. So people assumed that that's what we were. And my goodness, that's not who we were. And that's not what our price point was. And so I wanted to make sure that we differentiated in every conceivable way, right? Right from the get-go. Now today in 2024, as we discuss this, the concept of studios or boutique fitness, wildly popular. So people get the idea that, hey, I would go into a strip mall and go into a small space and do a type of workout. Made sense. But, people found out I was opening a business and I would always get asked, what are the locker rooms like? And do you have pools? And thought, no, this is going to sound weird, but we literally just strength train for 30 minutes.
That's interesting. So it was very controversial when you started in how you were going to do this boutique business. Boutique as a concept was very new. So how did you deal with that? I mean, is it one of those where, I can't remember who said it, but it's like, if you find yourself on the side of the majority, it's time to pause and reflect. It's normally a good thing if you're contrarian to an extent.
Yeah.
Not always true.
That wasn't, I love that idea. It was not my driving force. It was this, I had read Jim Collins, and Jim Collins introduces the hedgehog concept.
I love that.
3 questions. His 3 questions are, what are you passionate about? So write that down. These are 3 intersecting circles, like a Venn diagram. That's the first question. What are you passionate about? The second question is, what drives your economic engine, right? If you can't drive some revenue on it, it doesn't matter if you're passionate about it. And the third question, what can you be the best in the world at? And that third question, after he writes the books, he says, that was not a rhetorical question. If you can't be number 1 or number 2 in the category, you should narrow the scope of what you're doing. Well, I'm sitting in Starbucks reading about hedgehog concept, and I had just visited the most profitable health club in the world, Gainesville Health and Fitness. And in my own market, we have Lifetime Fitnesses everywhere. And I knew I could not be the best health club in the world, right? So, and I also wasn't passionate about all things health clubs. I would tour a health club and I would see spin classes and locker rooms and childcare centers and cafes. And I thought, I'm not into any of this. I'm passionate about strength training. And so our hedgehog concept was, well, I'm passionate about strength training. I think strength training done on an appointment basis, one-on-one or small group. Okay. That's what would drive our economic engine. And what could we be the best in the world at? It would be delivering strength training workouts in a time efficient manner. We could be the best in the world at that. So that was our hedgehog concept. So when we think about, was I trying to be, different intentionally? No, I was just trying to honor that hedgehog concept. So that was the focus of the business. And over 18 years, that focus hasn't changed. Now, a lot of times the focus of an enterprise needs to change strategically. We've been fortunate that it has not needed to change.
That's incredible that so many of your business strategy has stayed very consistent. Again, hedgehog concept is such a great idea and such an easy way to understand how to design that strategic niche for your business, which again, if people don't want to feel overwhelmed, don't want to know a central place they can learn this and a framework, it's traction, right? That's the book where again the idea of strategic niche, which is the same thing as the hedgehog concept. I guess reading about the hedgehog concept would develop that understanding too.
Yeah, you mentioned Traction or EOS. Traction's a book that talks about EOS. These are concepts that this author, Gino Wickman, has taken from all of these other authors, at the time. And, when I'm reading this in 2004 and 2005, it predates all of that, right? I maybe mentioned it before. Jim Collins comes out with an article in Harvard Business Review called, I think it was Put Your Values to Work for You. Patrick Lencioni had one and Jim Collins had one. And he speaks to the core ideology. And then a little after that, he comes out with Built to Last and then eventually Good to Great. And so that was the foundation. Now, every author on earth, including Gino Wickman, has talked about concepts like values and strategic need, what's truly the core business. But that filter of, well, what do you really want to be the best in the world at? Pretty powerful.
Yeah, and I haven't seen anyone else tie it all together as well as Gino does since then. This is such an important point. The reason I keep coming back to this is because obviously I work with a lot of fitness business owners, high intensity training business owners, and I just see that a lot of the problems that come up, the kind of response from me is always, well, what does your strategy say? Like, what have you decided to do in terms of your vision? What's your core focus? What's your strategic niche? Who is your target market? Because they're just so helpful in terms of giving you filters for focus, right? That's kind of the whole point. And I think that if you don't have that, if you don't have a clear target market, a clear customer, a clear core focus, a clear strategic niche, it just becomes so overwhelming and confusing. And it makes entrepreneurship really much more stressful than it has to be. It's already hard. So that's one of my takeaways.
And Lawrence, it's so hard on your team, right? Like when you have this hedgehog concept or your strategic niche, that's the core business, what to say yes to and what to say no to. And people don't bring ideas that are outside of that strategic niche because you say, hey, that's not the business that we're in. We're not going to entertain things that are outside of the strategic niche. And our team has appreciated having that clarity. This is what we're focused on. So let's innovate within this core business. So that's strategic niche. And then you mentioned the target market. Of course, we're constantly talking in a meeting. We've named our clients. We name our client Mary and Michael. And we say in our meetings, would Mary actually like this? Like, we are only building this for Mary. We're not building this for the world, or we're not building this for a person. We're building it for Mary and we're building it for Michael. And so if Mary and Michael wouldn't love it, we're not going to do it. That has to be our filter.
Understood. Luke, thank you so much for your time and for the opportunity for me to interview you on your podcast today. I really appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun as always. I'll hand back over to you, but thank you so much.
Lawrence, thank you for joining us and thanks for listening.
Hey, it's Lawrence again. Before you go, I have something special for those looking to accelerate their hit business. Would you like to know how to generate a flood of leads for free? Download our exclusive Build a Referral Machine playbook. It's a concise guide packed with proven strategies from Luke Carlson, CEO of Discover Strength, a fast-growing hit franchise. Clients in our Hit Business membership using these referral tactics have added 20 to 40 new clients, transforming their businesses dramatically. In this playbook, you'll uncover 4 dynamic referral tactics that you can implement right now to drive leads. Plus, when you download the guide, you'll gain access to invaluable resources to expand your business, like ready-to-use sales presentations, a guide for attracting top-notch trainers, a checklist for nailing your sales process, and so much more. And there's a bonus. Subscribe today to ensure you don't miss out on exclusive opportunities like live group calls with hit experts. Plus, you have the chance to contribute questions for our interactive Q&A blog posts and podcasts, where we directly address your queries with industry experts. These special events are scheduled periodically, and as a subscriber, you'll be the first to know when they happen. Just visit highintensitybusiness.com/ref, that's REF, short for referrals, highintensitybusiness.com/ref, or click the link available where you're watching or listening to this. Drop in your email and you'll get instant access to all these resources today.